Good morning. Thank you very much for joining me on this video. As probably most of you are aware, the provincial government is in the process of rolling out new legislation that's intended to replace the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. It's called the Trust in Real Estate Services Act 2020. And it's coming out in 3 phases. The first phase is already out. The second phase is now being rolled out. And the third phase is being developed. And I'm hoping next week to give you an overview of this new act. But what I want to do today is talk to you about one aspect of it, and that's discipline. But let me start by saying that phase 1 of the act really had 2 components in it. The first was the introduction of a PREC, that is Personal Real Estate Corporation, and that's in place, and a number of you have already incorporated personally and enjoy limited liability and especially tax benefits from that. And I applaud that. It's long overdue, and I'm excited about that. The second thing was a little bit of a change in the name that you could use as a registrant. You can call yourself a realtor now, or you can call yourself a real estate agent, and that's new. So that's phase 1. And phase 1, as I said, brings some good things. But phase 2, they're talking about discipline. And I want to tell you that there's been some changes over the years in RICO's handling of discipline. I'm thinking going way, way back to when a man by the name of Al Colclough was the registrar. And I liked Al, but he was a cop before he got into being involved in real estate. And he was very determined to exact fines and penalties and so on. And I listened to a seminar he was presenting one time, and he told how he had just come from a tribunal, and he was successful in pulling a real estate agent's license. And he said the reason I took their license is because they didn't hand in an agreement of purchase and sale in a timely fashion. They left it in their briefcase. What especially concerned me was he said, now I'm going to go back and go after the broker's license. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, Al, I don't understand. A broker can't very well police what he doesn't know. Are we supposed to go through all the salespeople's briefcases every day and find out what they haven't turned in? He said, as far as I'm concerned, the brokerage is responsible for everything the salesperson does. I'm going after the broker's license. So it was very non-forgiving, very, very harsh. Under Joe Reacher, the current registrar, and I think Joe gets it, I think they've moved into a much more moderate position where they differentiate between an error and a determined act of some kind of crookedness or fraud, and they come down both feet with the person who's the bad actor in the industry, as they should. But they recognize to err as human. And I think it was a move in the right direction. But the provincial government isn't really happy with that stance. They feel that RICO hasn't been tough enough, and so they want to toughen up on the measures that RICO takes. In fact, they were even looking at taking that power away from RICO. So they've beefed up on it, and they've done it on the act in a number of ways. One of the things they've done is they've increased the penalty or the fines that the discipline panel can give, and it's now up to $50,000 fine for an individual and a $100,000 fine for a corporation. That's pretty expensive. The second thing they've done is they've changed the corporation of the discipline panel. Now, 5 members in the discipline panel, at least one of them has to have no affiliation with real estate. That concerns me. I used to teach the real estate licensing program years ago, and it was amazing what people coming into the industry thought about the industry before they got into it. And I do a number of videos. Every week I do one faith-based video and one investment video. And my investment video, I go through investment real estate. I'm passionate about it. And it evokes all kinds of negative reaction from the general public who thinks that landlords are scoundrels, who thinks that people are making all kinds of money on the back of the poor, who begrudge people who buy real estate, who begrudge people who trade in real estate in the way of real estate salespeople. Concerns me if we get that element passing judgment on our activity. But that's what's happening. And an example of how RICO is tightening up, let me share with you just an incident that happened to me the other day. I was taking a course at TREB on their bylaw, and the gal who taught the course did an excellent job of it, but she cited one example of a discipline issue that came up in RICO. Now, I didn't research it myself, so you're getting it secondhand, but let me share it with you. She said that the registrant took a listing. Now, I don't understand. It sounds like he took it without attending, but he took a listing, and in the listing, he said hardwood floors throughout. Well, the other spouse, the one spouse gave him that information. The other spouse contacted him and corrected it and said, no, it's not hardwood floors, it's laminate floor. So the agent did an amendment on the listing and corrected it within 3 days. There was no offer had been made, nobody lost any money, nobody was misled, but RICO got wind of it, and RICO fined this particular person $8,000, saying you have an obligation to discover all material facts at the time of procuring a listing. So I think we're going to move more into that type of attitude by RICO and certainly by the Ontario government in terms of any errors we might make. And let me say, you need to be extremely careful, and I can't go through all of it. Let me touch on a couple of things. One is when you're procuring a listing. When you procure a listing, if the property's been listed before, pull a copy of the old listing. But that's for the reason of looking for red flags. It is not for you to copy any information from that listing. Don't use anything from the listing. Don't use measurements, don't use zoning, don't use anything. But check it over and see if there's anything you maybe didn't know about. Maybe there's something about urea formaldehyde. Maybe there's something about being a grow-op at some point. Something where you're going to see a red flag and you're going to start to investigate. That's the starting point. And then I want you to double check things that can be somewhat dubious. Zoning is an example. You can take the most current zoning map and the local municipality makes revisions to the zoning map half a dozen times or more every year. And so your zoning map may be the most current, but it may not be accurate. So pick up the phone, call the city, town, find out what the specific zoning is and what it allows for the property that you are listing. The taxes, make sure that you've got it right. So often people make a mistake on the taxes or they look at one. The bylaws, for example, the TREB bylaws, say it's got to be the current year, and if the current year isn't available, it has to be the previous year and designate that it is the previous year. But make sure that it's accurate. And measurements. You know, I think we are somewhat cavalier on measurements, and especially if it's a story and a half with an angled roof, or if it's an irregular room with closet coming out and so on. Understate and over-deliver. Don't do it the other way around. For example, I'm going back to TREB again, but TREB has in their bylaws that if you're taking a lot, frontage and depth, and the depth longer on one side than another because it's an irregular lot, they should use the smaller of the two and state lot irregular. Don't use the larger, don't overstate. And if, as I said, if it's cut out because of a closet, take the smaller size and state in the listing that it's irregular. Nobody's going to go into a lawsuit because they're getting more than they expected, but they might well if they're getting less than they expected. So you want to be careful about that. And then the other thing that's very, very important, as cited by that example I just gave you, is material facts. And especially, material facts sometimes are gray areas. Somebody died in the house. Is that a material fact? It doesn't matter to one person, it's important to somebody else, but it may be important to your client. So you need to zero down and find out what is important to your client. And then if your client raises something, don't just go by the listing. Really need to make inquiry to satisfy that inquiry. I hope this makes sense. I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg, but it's something we need to be forewarned about because we're going to see the whole industry move more and more in this direction of really analyzing our behavior and making sure that we didn't make any mistakes at all. I want to thank you very much. As I say, I'm hoping next week to give you a quick overview of the Trust and Real Estate Services Act, and I hope you'll stay with me and come back again next week. Thank you very much.